afternoon. Thank you for attending the fourth meeting of the Orange County Citizen Safety Task Force. My name is Carol Burkett. I'm the Deputy Chief of Staff for Mayor Jerry Demings' office, and it is my pleasure to introduce Orange County Mayor Jerry Demings and the co-chairs of the task force, Co-Chair Rod Love and Co-Chair Jim Coffin, to begin the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carol. Happy Super Bowl afternoon, everybody. Wait, that didn't sound. Happy Super Bowl afternoon. All right. I'd like to call this meeting to order and ask my co-chair, Mr. Coffin, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I invite you to join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I'd like to welcome everybody to the fourth meeting of the Orange County Citizen Safety Task Force. Since we began on November the 6th, there have been the four subcommittees have held 29 meetings representing approximately 87 combined hours of the work that's been put toward this effort. I want to personally thank the task force members, the presenters, and the members from the community that have faithfully attended meetings along with our dedicated staff, and I want to emphasize the dedicated Orange County staff that's been working with us. I appreciate everyone's willingness to work together, to hold joint meetings, to continue to learn what it means to agree to disagree as we continue to press forward on this mission. Understanding the issues as we develop our strategies and recommendations. It takes this type of effort to get to the solutions that we need. I would like to, at this time, turn the meeting over to my co-chair, Mr. Jim Coffin.
And I would like to just thank you once again for the time and energy and creativity that you have invested in this. And it's only 1 month from today that we'll be having our last meeting. That's only about 19 working days. And so we are coming to the end, and we have a lot to do before that. I'd like to invite our Orange County Mayor, Jerry Demings, to say a few words at this time.
Thank you, Pastor Coffin, for the wonderful introduction. Let me just say to all of you, we do sincerely appreciate the work that you've been doing. I've had the privilege to attend a few of the subcommittee meetings and the general meetings at large. The work that you're doing is very, very important to our overall community. And the Board of County Commission has approved the $2 million allocation to meet the needs of whatever the recommendations end up being as seed money going forward. So we are all waiting to see what you recommend, and then we will move forward with the execution of that plan. So again, thank you.
At this time, I'd like to take the roll call, and so please say present or here when your name is called. Rachel Allen. Here. Rolando Bailey. Rolando Bailey. Patricia Brigham.
Here.
Charles Brown. Charles Brown. Lisa Coffey. Ruth Sedeno. Ruth Sedeno. Mimi Chan.
Here.
Bishop Kelvin Cobaris.
Present.
Jonathan Cox. Jonathan Cox. I think he has a class today at this time. Fernando Cuevas. Fernando Cuevas. TJ Legacy Cole.
Present.
Eric Dubose.
Present.
Lisa Early. Lisa Early. Pastor Terrence Gray. Pastor Terrence Gray. Roger Henberg.
Here.
Adam Hartnett.
Present.
Corey Austin Jackson. Corey. Subhash Katil.
Present on WebEx.
is on WebEx.
Present on WebEx.
Okay, thank you. Samantha Love. Samantha. Ricky Lee. Ricky. Bishop-elect Derek McCrae. Derek. Chief Mike McKinley.
Jerome Miller for Chief Mike McKinley.
Thank you. Honorable John Mina.
I'm here.
Miles Mulrain. Miles. Maisha Murray. Maisha. Nancy Osh.
Here.
And I believe Javier Andres is on WebEx. Thank you.
Present on WebEx.
Chief Orlando Rolon.
Rich Land in for Chief Rolon.
Thank you. Patricia Rumpf.
Yes, here.
Ruben Saldana. Reverend Gabriel Salguero. Michael Scott. Honorable Monique Worrell.
Present.
Thank you very much.
The draft minutes from the January 15th Task Force meeting have been provided to the members for review. Are there any changes to the minutes?
Thank you.
You
This is
recognize?
Adam. I'm not listed on the roll call, but I was there. Adam Hartnett.
So recognized. I saw a hand as it relates to the minutes. Pastor Gabriel?
Yeah, page 3. It's not compassion with other counties, although we have that. It's comparison with other counties when I'm quoting me. And page 12, it's not, we come with nativity, but naivete. Maybe it's because I'm a reverend they put nativity, but it's page 12, last paragraph. Just some minor wordsmithing.
Any other changes to the minutes? Seeing none, having that amended and reflected, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed by the same sign? Thank you. The minutes are approved. Also, approval of the minutes from the joint subcommittee meeting. We also have provided you copies of the draft minutes from the Prevention and Intervention Subcommittee that was held January the 27th. Are there any changes to those minutes? Hearing and seeing no changes, do I have a motion from the members to accept those minutes? Any motion? Motion? I'll take no motion to accept those minutes?
I can say that I'd like to see more detail reflected in the notes of what the community members present actually stated.
So reflected, so we would have staff with prevention and intervention go ahead and make those amendments. And Adam, let me just make sure that I'm understanding you correctly. You want that denoted per member of each of those task force reflected in the minutes?
The words spoken by the community members outlined at least.
Understood, and we have those, I believe.
Yes, we have that available.
We will include that in the minutes. With that being said, can I get a motion to accept?
I'll move to accept.
Second? Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, so those are been accepted. They are approved. I want to thank everybody for approving those minutes. Pastor Coffin.
At this time, I'd like to ask the Orange County staff if we have any members of the community who have filled out a speaker card, in which case we would invite that person to come forward. And please share any comments, and they will be added to the public record. And there is a time limit on the presentation, so please lead us through this, Carol.
Thank you so much, Co-Chair Coffin. We do have one public comment, and Linda Coffin with Moms Demand Action is in our other room, and ISS will pull her up on the screen. She'll have 3 minutes for her public comment. Thank you, Linda.
Hi, my name is Linda Coffin. 4590 Salisbury Court, Orlando 32810. And I'm also here with Fiona Shannon, who is in the room with you. And we are both volunteers with Moms Demand. First, I want to thank you very much for allowing us to attend these meetings, particularly the intervention and the prevention meetings. They've been very educational, and we've learned a lot, and we hope to share that with all of our moms. We also have been talking to a lot of moms around the country, and in fact, there's a group in Seattle that we're very excited about. Seattle just started a program called Restorative Pathways that seems to fit many of the things that we've been talking about, and they are willing to talk with you if you would like to talk to them about how they came to the solutions that they came to. They work with community grassroots programs, and Carol said that she would help us set up a virtual call if any of you would like to talk with them. We also last night started on a brand new gun violence prevention group with the state of Florida Moms Groups, and we're very excited about that. We'll be meeting monthly. It is a city gun violence program, and we'll be learning about programs throughout the state of Florida, and we'll be glad to share those with you. Why is Moms Demand Action important to you? We feel like we can be of service and that we have a very large group in the Orlando area. Osceola County and Seminole also join us. We also are part of the statewide Moms Demand Action group and the national group, which Moms Demand Action is also connected with Everytown, and through Everytown we can actually request funding, particularly for community grassroots programs. So we feel that we could help that way. We also want to work more with the groups that y'all have been talking about. We feel like that we can help support them, and we are anxious to start doing more of that. We're very strong legislatively. We have already started with the 2021 legislative session, talking to the different legislators about gun sense legislation. And we also are looking at federal legislation, so we are very strong in that way. Again, we thank you very much for allowing us to attend these groups. I live in zip code 32810, which is one of the targeted areas, so I am part of the community, and Fiona and I want to get moms as part of the solution. So thank you very much.
I'd like to just take this opportunity to thank Linda, who is no relation to me, by the way, but she's an admirable woman. Anybody who will marry a man named Coffin, you know, it's a brave person. But anyway, I'd like to thank both Linda and Fiona for their attendance at the various meetings that we've had. They have taken it very seriously. They are very concerned about reducing gun violence, and it's wonderful to see people in the community who give that kind of support. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Co-Chair Coffin. One of the things that has been a great byproduct of the task force meeting has been the level of information that we've received from the courts. We've had the chief judge present. We've had law enforcement walk us through processes, if you would. We've had the community come to the table and give us their feedback. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce our state attorney for the 9th Judicial Circuit, Ms. Monique Worrell, who will present before us what the role of the state attorney is. State Attorney Worrell, you're welcome and thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Chair Love, Mayor Demings, for having me this afternoon. It is my pleasure to come before the committee and engage in what is one of my favorite parts of this job, and that is community education. It is important, I believe, for the community to have a full understanding of the different components of our justice system and have clarity and truth as it relates to their knowledge on the issues that we've been discussing over these last several months. With that being said, I want to first introduce, of course, it's not going to work for the first time, to advance the slide. Did it? Okay. All right. So this is my team. The video here is a little bit blocked, so you can't see everyone. But here with me today is one of my deputy chief assistants, Shanna Manuel, my other deputy chief assistant, Alfredo Zamora, Keisha Mulford, my director of public affairs, Camila Perry is my executive director, and Chief Eric Edwards is my chief investigator for my law enforcement agency within the state attorney's office. So I want to start by talking about what criminal justice reform is, because when people hear the term criminal justice reform, they begin to think different things, and some people get nervous and they become afraid on what does it actually mean. And what I want the community to understand is that all criminal justice reform means is that we are looking as a society at what we've done, and we are seeing how we can correct that going forward. Right? And that makes sense in any practice. You get better by looking at what you've done and seeing how you can make it better going forward. Now, in the realm of criminal justice, we have had a war on drugs over the last several decades. And that war on drugs hasn't stopped the drug business at all. So what we have to do is we have to look at what we've been doing and see what we can do differently so that we can actually produce results that can possibly be more effective. Criminal justice reform is balancing the interests of personal accountability. People who offend need to be held accountable. The rights of the victims, the rule of law, rehabilitation, while using incarceration as a last resort. So I believe in data-based practices. And if we look at the data in our criminal justice system, it will show us that it is wealth, not culpability, that shapes outcomes in our criminal justice system. That many people who are charged with crimes lack resources to investigate cases or get the help that they need, and that there are racial disparities that exist that have to be broken because there's this inherent dangerousness that is associated with Black and brown people that lead to excessive sentencing in our criminal justice system. And as I said before, criminal justice reform is acknowledging those things and changing them going forward so that we can produce different results. One of the things that I said when I was running for office is that we cannot continue to do the same thing and expect a different result. That is by text the definition of insanity. So if we want something different, then we must do something different. And the reality is that mass incarceration doesn't reduce violent crime. Here in the United States, we incarcerate more people than anywhere in the world. And in the state of Florida, we do it at a rate higher than the national average. Since the 1970s, we have increased our rate of incarceration by 300%. But we are here today and for these last several weeks to discuss the fact that we have a violent crime problem here in our community. If incarceration actually resolved that, then there would be no need for this task force. There'd be no need for us to be here. So I submit to you, and the research and data shows us, that mass incarceration doesn't reduce violent crime, that using prisons to deal with poverty and mental illness and addiction actually makes these situations worse. That when you send a nonviolent individual into the violent atmosphere of jail and prison, that they return to the community violent in a way that they would not have been had we not resulted with incarceration. Most crime reduction benefits of incarceration are limited to property crime, and people leave overcrowded and violent jails and prisons more traumatized, more mentally ill, worse with their addictions than they were when they went. So we have to have strategies for crime prevention because Inevitably, someone now is saying, so then what do we do? Because we have a problem, and if we're not going to incarcerate, then what do we do? So what I want to say is hear me and hear me very clearly. There are some people that must go to prison. There is no getting away from that. I am not here to advocate for freeing individuals who are a threat or a danger to our community. But what I am saying is that we cannot use a sledgehammer to kill a fly. That this one-size-fits-all criminal justice approach that we have utilized throughout the decades has not served us well as a community. Here in the state of Florida, we spend more than $2 billion a year incarcerating people in the Department of Corrections. $2 billion. That's $22,000 a year per individual that we incarcerate. What could we do with $22,000 a year as crime prevention? Now, I commend Mayor Demings for coming together with the Board of County Commissioners in order to put resources into our community so that we can start building where we have these deficits, because poverty leads to crime. Poverty and lack of resources is what leads to crime. And if we can replenish the resources in our communities, it is then that we can see a reduction of crime. I will be working in my office to take another look at how we view crime, because our tough on crime approach that we have used has not worked. It is time instead for us to be smart on crime. It is time for us to engage in community education in a way that people can be educated about the laws and the society in which they live in, what is expected of them as citizens, and to hold them accountable for that. I thank you for this opportunity to be before the task force this afternoon. It is important to me that the community receive education that is based on fact, not feelings and not opinions. That the community receive education from people who actually have the ability to address the things that we need to address. I'm thankful that Chief Judge Myers was able to come and clear up some misinformation that the task force had received from individuals who were speaking from one side and not having all of the information and not having a good understanding of the laws that governed these particular areas of the law as it relates to pretrial release. And I want the mayor and the community to consider my office as a resource for education as it relates to the criminal justice system and how we can partner together to build a stronger, safer community. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that clarification and amplification, and we appreciate very much your being here and the contribution you and your staff are making to this process. There are 4 subcommittees that have been working diligently to put together recommendations, and we're going to invite each of those subcommittees to have one of their co-chairs present today. And I would like to invite Reverend Gabriel Salguero to come forward to talk about the Prevention Subcommittee. The co-chairs of the subcommittees have been given 5 minutes. There's obviously much more that they could say, but they will just give us a kind of a bird's eye view of what's been going on and the things that are being discussed and planned at this point. So thank you very much, Gabriel, for the work you're doing and for what you will share with us right now.
Buenas tardes, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you to the co-chairs and Mr. Mayor, Madam State Attorney, for your presentation. My name is Reverend Gabriel Salguero. I'm one of the co-chairs for the Prevention Subcommittee, together with Ms. Lisa Early. As you will see, there are the list of the members of the Prevention Subcommittee, all who have been doing a diligent and august job. In the 4.5 minutes that are left, I just want to underscore some of the top line items of what we did or have done and will do. So this is a 30,000 foot view in the 5 minutes, not getting into the minutia. I want to point in the next slide to our foci, the children and young people in high violent crime rate areas in the most impacted zip codes, and that we've drawn from the data that has been presented in the multiple meetings that we have held. And here are some of the themes that you can read on the screen or see on the screen. Addressing poverty and family economic insecurity. You've heard some words about that from State Attorney Worrell. Ensuring access to effective, and we want to underscore that adjective, effective youth and parenting programs. Reforming the criminal justice system, and I think that State Attorney Worrell gave us a good primer on what we mean by reform. Reducing access to guns. Here I want to say on behalf of the Prevention Subcommittee, our deepest thanks for Moms Against Gun Violence. They've been to every meeting I've been to, so muchas gracias. You've been diligent. Increasing community awareness of issues and programs, and that's both around marketing and messaging. There are a lot of good programs out there that the community may not be aware of. And improve overall neighborhood conditions. And so we're taking, as most of our colleagues in other subcommittees, a holistic and integral view of this. It's an all of the above strategy. Let me underscore in the next slide some of our most recent activity, although this is not all of the activity. I think this is some of the top line. You're going to hear from my colleague and friend, Bishop Colbares, some reviews of the joint committee that the Intervention and Prevention Subcommittee had at New Life Church on January 27th, because we are committed to community input and community voices. We actually had several voices speak from multiple constituencies, both from members of the community, from law enforcement, from mothers, from activists within the community, and we're deeply thankful. Many of the recommendations have arisen from their contribution. I want to underscore two things from the Intervention and Prevention Subcommittee joint meeting on January 27th at New Life that perhaps Bishop Colbares may underscore. One of the recommendations is the convening of smaller or emerging effective programs, that it is in the purview of the commissioners and the mayor's office to convene for building capacity and technical assistance, perhaps programs that have not had access to that, and that was said multiple times. And secondly, from our subcommittee, we want to underscore the presence and voices of the credible messengers that were there. There were multiple young men and women and quite frankly, of every generation, who underscored the need for credible messengers and their impact in that community. Last week, we had a meeting that was on February 4th of the Prevention Subcommittee, and here we heard mostly from law enforcement and also from the State Attorney's Office. And the point of that meeting, after hearing from the community, is to hear about existing and effective programs. You'll see the names of the presenters there. Major Carlos Torres from Orange County Sheriff's Office, Corporal Joseph Lundy from the Orlando Police Department, and Deputy Chief Jerome Miller from Apopka Police Department. Each of them presented about existing and effective programs, but at the same time gave us some up-to-date statistics about juvenile arrest and diversion programs like the citation programs, mentorship programs, holiday programs, and our subcommittee wants to say thank you for that, and we also want to underscore that much more needs to be said in the communities about what those law enforcement agencies are doing so we can raise both the profile and the information in those communities. So those were some of the top line items of our last meeting. I think what's most important in the last 25 seconds is what are our next steps. We continue to identify the root causes for violent crimes. Again, this is, as the mayor reminded us at our last task force meeting, a long haul. We're not going to fix everything in one committee or one task force or one commission, but we need to keep addressing the root causes: poverty, education, access, so forth. Secondly, identify programs that provide effective alternatives, diversion programs to gang recruitment, to violence. And finally, and this is important, analyze data. Continue to prepare draft recommendations, which you will hear by early March, using the SMART goals. I thank you for your time. My time is finished.
Thank you, Co-Chair Gabriel. A great presentation. It gives me great pride to introduce Bishop Kevin Cabarrus, the co-chair of the Intervention Subcommittee, for an update. Bishop Cabarrus, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, co-chairs, and to our Orange County Citizen Safety Task Force. I'm here representing our intervention subcommittee, where myself and Samantha Love are co-chairs, and of course we have a great quorum of great minds that have worked together over the last few months to facilitate the discussion of recommendations that we will bring, looking forward to bring to the mayor on next month. The goal of the intervention subcommittee is to identify program models that will redirect the unlawful activities of youthful offenders that present a significant risk to our community. We've had presentations mainly that have come from the credible messengers that you've heard aforementioned in the prevention presentation, while amongst there are other presentations that were giving the consensus of those presentations were more so a holistic approach. But what made the presentation of the credible messengers so unique is because, of course, if we're going to engage a community that is being systemically impacted by many of the things that have been aforementioned, you need to have people who are grassroots leaders within that community, who have credibility amongst that community, amongst offenders and the like, to be at the table as it relates to the discussion of how resources are used to make impact on the communities that those messengers serve. The themes around this discussion were these a few that are listed. Creating a long-term plan on reducing gun violence and violent crime. As we've heard Mayor Demmons so often state, that this task force, again, is not the cure-all for our problems in Orange County. It didn't take us a few months to get there, and it won't take a few months to resolve it, but there must be a big picture, a big plan that far exceeds his administration and even our leadership on various communities in this community. And then also assessing the system and creating options for change. Orange County has a plethora of programs, a plethora of different resources that can be used to impact the issues that we are facing. However, we need to assess what is working, what is not, what is available, what resources have not been properly marketed to the community so that they know that they can use, and then kind of build from there about addendums and different things that we need to add to expand that particular system. Then to increase the community's knowledge of services. As I reviewed, as we'll hear later, the survey that came from the citizens of Orange County, because their voice is most important to the recommendations that we are creating, is many of them felt that they were uninformed regarding gun violence and the reduction of it in their communities. So we have to do a better job, as we've heard already previously stated in the presentations prior, that we have to do a better job of not only informing but educating the community about what's going on. The media cannot be the only source of education for the community at large that are being directly impacted by these issues. Now, the meeting that we had, the joint meeting between the Intervention and Prevention Committee, I believe was a success. Number one, it was a success because why I am most excited about this task force is there's nothing like standing shoulder to shoulder with a leader who is not just spewing political rhetoric, who's not just making noise to look good before the citizens who voted for them, but a leader who is actually engaged in the process of reducing crime and making these things happen in our community. Not only did Mayor Demmons organize this task force, but Mayor Demmons has been engaged in not only the general task force meeting, but attending the subcommittee meetings because this is a priority to him. More than that, at this community meeting, I thought that the mayor would just come through after a busy day just to say hello and goodbye because he deserved that time to rest. But no, the Jerry Demmons, the Mayor Jerry Demmons that I have known for many, many, many years in his various capacities of leadership, and where he knows I'll come and push back when I don't agree with something, but I will also commend leaders when they do the work that they have been elected to do. And our mayor sat through a 2.5-hour meeting and listened to the citizens, not complain, but their concerns and even their ideas on what we could do to engage this issue. Can we join together and just applaud our mayor just for his presence and his leadership? I'm almost out of time. At that particular meeting, let me move quickly. They talked about a need for people to understand youth with credible messengers, grassroots organizations, and I'm summing up here. They mostly talked about grassroots organizations that understood the community need to be supported, meaning that we don't need to keep putting funds into organizations that may have not produced the outcomes that they were intended, and to hold the organizations accountable to ensure they are providing the right services to the right people. So collectively, the community said that we need the programs, but we need to make sure that the programs are grassroots and those programs that we put on the forefront are held accountable for the resources that they have been given and make it measurable. And finally, I know I'm out of time, but a parent called me just the other day, and parents and guardians are asking for effective services because she has a young man who is involved in the juvenile system who's been let go repeatedly, who she wants to stay in there to get rehabilitated because now her children who are not doing anything wrong, lives are being threatened because of the community that they live in and the offenses of her son. So this is not something that we can overlook. It's something that we've got to engage because there's an outcry for all of us to collectively do our part to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bishop Cabarrus. And I'd like to introduce Patricia Rumpf, who's the Enforcement Subcommittee co-chair, but I should just clarify that a little bit. The intention was that she would be a co-chair, but her co-chair has been unable to function with her, and so she has borne the task alone. So thank you very much for the hard work you've been putting in. We look forward to what you have to say.
Thank you, and you're very welcome. I really haven't brought it alone. The committee has been very well attended. Those that's on the task of the enforcement committee has been there, so they helped shouldered and very responsible. So thank you very much. This is the enforcement task force, and we're going to focus on one of the three pillars that the enforcement committee was charged with. And the objective, we met 2 times since our last meeting on January the 15th. And the first meeting, immediately, it was January the 21st. And immediately in that meeting, we had an open discussions of the feedback of the full task force to get a feel of where we were and how we're fitting in with this full task force. And so from that open discussion, we realized that we need to revisit one of our recommendations that we had made earlier. And that recommendation we had made earlier was to law enforcement town hall community meeting. We had discussed that early on. So we want to focus on that town hall meeting because we realized that we are addressing 2 groups of people. One, like the state attorney says, that deserve to be arrested. And one that we realize that we cannot keep arresting them and building a prison for people. So from that discussion, recommendation, we went through the SMART goals. We want to marry that against our SMART goal, make sure we're doing the right things. So from that, we said have a law enforcement town hall meeting. And we want to be specific with that. That's the SMART goal, being specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. We were specific. Our specific was that we want to make sure that we continue doing what we're doing. And our outcome would be that we would have citizens coming to the community and law enforcement being in the community as well. And that's our community engagement. Our specific thing is to be engaged in the community. Is it measurable? Yes, it is measurable. We'll be able to measure this SMART goal by the attendance of those that come and the law enforcement that is committed to come, and by the ambassador that we adopt to be a part of this town hall meeting. So we can measure by that standard. We also can measure by the response that we get when issues come before the task force, how soon we are responding to these concerns by our next meeting, our turnaround town and addressing the issues. So that's how we're going to measure the town hall meeting. Is it achievable? It is achievable. Law enforcement on the task force has agreed to participate, and so it is achievable. We realize there may be some limitation as far as achieving this, and the limitation could be with the ambassadors from the community wanting to participate. So that may be a limitation. The limitation may be as the county limitation. So, but it is achievable. Is it relevant? Yes, it is relevant. It's relevant because we know that we need to, after 120 days, keep this communication going with the community as what we're doing as far as law enforcement and as far as the task force. So it's very relevant that the community have an opportunity to come in and address their concerns to law enforcement. And is it time bound? Yes, we said 6 months to a year to take this forward. So that was our first meeting after our task force on January the 21st. We met again on January the 25th. And that meeting, like State Attorney Worrell said, we had the chief judge there, and we got some clarity about the pretrial release, so we won't hash that anymore. And then we had some data from the Orlando Police Department about, I'm going to use the term hotspot, because that's what it is, hotspot. We are data-driven. We are working by science. So we address those issues. And then on January the 27th, we participated in the community meeting. I was there, and Rod Love was there, and Jim was there. We was there. We participated in the community meeting. Moving forward, we also looked at, after January the 15th, as soon as we left our task force meeting, the very next day, the shooting did not stop. So the shooting has not stopped. There's been several shooting incidents with teenagers, 15 years old, 18 years old, 27 years old, that has not stopped. So as far as law enforcement concerned, we must do something to deter what is going on in the community. And just to wrap this up, as a parent, I do not want to get that call that says, a visit from the police department says that my child has been shot. I do not want to get that call that my mother received in November in 1974 that her child was murdered by gunshots. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great presentation. You've heard from prevention, intervention, and enforcement subcommittees. It gives me great pride and pleasure to bring up the last pillar, co-chair, and that is Patricia Brigham of the prosecution subcommittee. Ms. Brigham, you're welcome.
Thank you so much, Co-Chair Love, Co-Chair Coffin, and Mayor Demings, and to the co-chairs for continuing to attend our subcommittee meetings on prosecution. We've had 2 meetings since the last full task force has met. These meetings have been very productive and filled with provocative and serious conversation. We have determined that when it comes to prosecution, this is not just about putting people in jail. It's about other methods that would be beneficial to those offenders and not just creating more prison or jail overcrowding. The members of our task force you see up here, we thank all of them for their participation. We thank the State Attorney's Office for their full participation, and they've presented us with some wonderful ideas, and they're going to be taking a look about one of them that I'm going to talk about in just a moment. Now, at the last task force meeting we had, which was this past Monday, and as Co-Chair Rump mentioned, the enforcement task force, we did have a joint meeting with them, and I don't want to repeat too much of what she said, but just to refer back to that was a couple of weeks ago. And we heard from Chief Justice Donald Myers of the Ninth Judicial Circuit, who answered our many questions about pretrial release, because we were very concerned about offenders being released before trial who had, say, for example, committed aggravated battery. But we came to understand that unless these suspects were charged with a capital crime or something that would require life imprisonment, that their due process included pretrial release, and that each case is considered individually, each case is considered uniquely. And so we had a very good discussion, a Q&A with the judge and partners of that judiciary. So we had a discussion at Monday's subcommittee hearing that pretrial release, we looked into it. We found the necessary answers we were looking for, but that is something that we are going to take off our plate as a SMART goal because it's really out of our hands. It's in the Constitution, the right to due process, and of course there's statutory provisions as well. So we also discussed the priorities of our subcommittee on Monday, which are, communication. We have to better communication between enforcement, between intervention activists and prevention activists and prosecution. The better the trust, the better the results. And of course, also, we need to really emphasize the importance of education in our communities. If we can reach out to troubled youth who are committing this kind of gun violence and educate them as to how they can be involved citizens in a democracy, that may be one way that we can reduce some of these gun crimes. We took a good look at the geographic stewardship that was brought to us by U.S. Attorney Handberg. And this is a very exciting program that our state attorney's office is going to look at further, and we're going to discuss again on February the 28th. This would really allow prosecutors to go into communities to which they're either assigned or live, troubled communities, and work in partnership with community leaders, troubled kids, and try to bring about solutions other than, those that would lead up to putting someone in jail. So state and federal prosecution officers would commit to assign an appropriate number of prosecutors to serve as geographic stewards with the preference, again, for prosecutors who live in the area. They would decide whether to review all cases in the area or just a significant number. And for any violent crime or firearm case that should be prosecuted, the state and federal prosecutors would decide whether prosecution should be conducted in the state or federal court. The geographic stewards would meet on a regular basis with members of the community organizations, and with community leaders. And it looks like I'm out of time, so I will thank you very much. We will be making our further recommendations coming soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patricia. And thanks to all the subcommittee co-chairs for the presentations you have given. As task force members, you have participated in and helped to advertise a major survey that's been taken to find out a bit about how the community feels about things. And Carol Burkett is going to give us a little overview of what that survey has discovered.
Thank you, Co-Chair Coffin. I appreciate that, and thank you to the members that helped make this survey possible and to get it out into the community. And as they pull that up, you all have this presentation, so I'm going to go through it rather quickly since you probably had a chance to peruse it, but let's get started. So we're going to quickly go through the background questions, the 14 questions that we have, and some key findings. There we go, background. As you all know, the purpose of the survey, just like our recent community meeting, was to engage our community members and get insight on solutions, strategies, concerns that they have when it comes to gun violence and reducing violent crime in the community. The survey was launched on December 23rd and ended January 31st. Some of the background, and sorry, I think I went ahead on this slide. So it was in English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole. Promotion, again, it all started with the 37 members that are part of this Citizen Safety Task Force, and your presence in the community, your leadership, and your social media presence that helped get the survey out with a multitude of other agencies, volunteer advisory boards, our school system, our houses of worship, businesses. I have a very long list. Our community centers, parks and recreation. And then we also had some ads on Facebook and Twitter and Google just to help get the word out, as well as you all, if you've been to Barnett Park or the Convention Center, we have lines there for people getting tested or getting their vaccine for COVID-19. So we also use that opportunity to put some yard signs out with the survey and the survey link in hopes that they would take that as they are sitting there. So a lot of promotion. Respondents, we had 2,218 respond back. And as you know, our population in Orange County is 1.4 million, so a little over 1% of the population responded. So if we get into the questions, as I said, we had 14 questions. One of the first questions is, what language do you write most frequently? As you can see, 87% said English with 13% in Spanish. 97% of the residents live in Orange County and 3% reside in other areas. The next question was, how serious is the level of violent crime in your community? Not at all serious. It's that top bar, 21%, not too serious at 39%. 16% serious, somewhat serious, 14%, and very serious at 10%. Do you feel safe in your community? 25% responded that they feel very safe, and 59% feels safe. So that's about 84%. And then 13% unsafe, very unsafe. So that's about 17% that did not feel safe or very unsafe. And then in the past 3 years, how would you rate the level of gun violence and violent crime in your community? As you can see, the largest result there, 59% said it stayed about the same, with 28% saying it increased and 13% showing a decrease. In the past 3 years, do you feel gun violence and violent crime in your community is committed by juveniles, adults, or both? As you can see, the community perception is both at 69%, and then further down, adults at 15% and juveniles at 16%. We then asked the question, who provides police protection in your community? And a lot of people live in, they say Orlando. They may not realize they're in unincorporated Orange County, but 48% do know that the Orange County Sheriff's Office is who they receive protection from, and 26% OPD. And then you can see the list as it goes down. About 7% didn't know the answer to that question. And then how would you rate the level of police protection in your community? So together, 64% said excellent good. That's combining 21% for excellent, 43% good, and then fair or poor, 36%. In the past 3 years, have you or someone in your household been the victim of violent crime that occurred in your community? 91% said no, but we did have 9% that said yes, with 6 reporting that violent crime. And then, do you feel law enforcement makes it easy for you to provide input to help solve problems in your community? As you can see, 43% did not have an opinion on this question, 33% said yes, and 24% said no. And then, how would you characterize the relationship between law enforcement and members of your community? We have several responses here to choose from, but very positive and somewhat positive was about 55%. 31% were neutral in this category. And then 14% somewhat negative and very negative. So that means I really need to move along. Do you feel community has access to prevention and intervention programs? And when we looked at this, we said that could be a couple of things. So 55% said yes, 45% said no. This could mean a lot of people don't realize the programs that are in the community or how to access those. So it's an education campaign that I know a lot of prevention intervention are talking about, so we can make sure people know where those programs are and how to access those. And then next, in your opinion, what can be done to prevent and reduce gun violence and violent crime? You were allowed to choose more than one, so these do not add up to 100 if you do that math. But number one was expanding mentoring and intervention programs and increasing prevention programs for youth. So if you look at those two together, that was overwhelming. And then increasing law enforcement presence, 59%, developing a public awareness campaign at 50%, and expanding Neighborhood Watch. I am not going to go into these, but I just wanted to let you know we had over 800 responses when you had an opportunity to provide additional suggestions. And usually when someone fills out a survey, they quickly check the box, and some people don't take a lot of time to fill that out. So I appreciate everyone who filled that out and gave us some great suggestions. I'm going to make sure that that goes to each and every one of you all, so you have that information as you get into your recommendation work and you can see what's in there. But just to give you an idea of what we did receive, provide more resources and locations for prevention programs for youth, educate our community, hire credible messengers, have classes on gun licensing, make it harder to access guns, have police patrol through neighborhoods, affordable mental health care, substance abuse treatment, a universal basic income would go a long way. Provide a living wage, enhance basic education, and give youth a path forward that doesn't involve crime. That's just a very small smattering of the over 800 responses that we had. So again, you all have this survey. I'm not going to go over the demographics, just a few key findings. Once again, 84% of respondents said they felt safe or very safe. 60% of respondents felt crime is not too serious. 9% of respondents had someone in their household that had been a victim of a violent crime, and 6% reported that crime. And 28% respondents stated the level of violence and violent crime in the past 3 years has increased. So again, thank you for all that you did to make this survey possible and for giving me a few minutes to highlight those results. We will have the survey, so if you like to dig through data, the entire survey will be on, and you can go through each of these questions and drill down even further, so that's going to be on our website for everyone. Thank you, co-chairs, and I will be over there for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Carroll. I will say that the information from the survey I found, and I've gotten a great deal of feedback, that those are tools that we can use in our tool belt as we proceed forward with the task force goals. At this point in time, we've set aside the remainder of this time for questions, comments, and dialogue. But before we begin, one of the things I wanted to mention, because Co-Chair Cabarrus as well as Co-Chair Gabriel mentioned this when they did their presentation, you mentioned young people that came to the forefront to present before the community, and that was critically important, and it's still critically important, because this is the only time that we'll meet collectively as a group during the month of February. I also wanted to note the significance of young people participating in this process. We all know the name Rosa Parks, but one name that we're not all that familiar with is Claudette Colvin. We're familiar with Rosa Parks because we're recognizing her as it relates to refusing to give up her seat at 42 years old. But 9 months earlier, there was a 15-year-old who refused to give up her seat and was arrested. So this movement, the progress that we're charged, and Mayor Demings, I know you don't like being recognized and thanked the way we're thanking you, but want to recognize you for that, because I also want to end on this note. November the 6th, we had law enforcement provide a presentation to this body. And it wasn't totally well received. We are recognizing the tools that we have. We're coming to a better understanding that we don't need to use a hammer when we need to screw something in. And in other instances, as the state attorney mentioned, we don't need to always try to hammer a screw in. The sheriff presented here about last month at our open meeting. And I got to tell you, while we still have a great deal of progress to make, what I heard about the numbers of civil citations that have been issued, the number of kids that can benefit from a second chance, we're doing it. We're starting to recognize and use those tools a whole lot better. So at this juncture, I would ask that we open the meeting, Co-Chair Coffin, to hear the comments, discussions, and just remember that not one of us in here is smarter than all of us put together. So with that, I move that we open the meeting for open discussion. Since my sight is a little bit bad, if you could just kind of motion so Chairman Coffin and I can recognize you. Chairman Cabarrus, Co-Chair Cabarrus, you're recognized.
Thank you, Co-Chair Love. My comment, I guess, slash question is probably going back to the prosecution subcommittee's report. And what is highlighted in that report is that they have decided that they're not going to pursue discussion or recommendations regarding pretrial release. I happen to have been a part of the law enforcement and prosecution joint meeting, and I actually probed some questions and asked Chief Judge Meyer some specific questions, as well as making some points that everything that is permissible does not have to be done. In other words, I was alluding to the fact that judges have judicial discretion. And I know that while it was asserted that there was misinformation that was given, but I don't find misinformation when it is coming directly from the circuit court system and the clerk of the court, except they inputted the information wrong. It clearly, all the information came from the circuit court as it relates to pretrial offenders that have been released on pretrial release and have reoffended while they're on pretrial release. I believe that maybe because this is an issue that they don't want to have public discussion about, there's going to be some private discussion, because even if the prosecution committee does not decide to submit a recommendation, I will submit a recommendation to my committee, and we will recommend to the mayor and even beyond. While I know that our Orange County mayor authority is limited to the local Orange County government, I do understand that some of these matters are legislative. I am far from uneducated on the issues as what it relates to move legislation and statutes here in the state of Florida. And in order for us to do that, that is called lobbying and lobbyists, and all of us are going to our legislators to see that these things are done, which can be done not only as a task force, it can be done as a community leaders collectively. So my statement is that while that issue may not be pursued, I still feel that all of us collectively should look into it, because Chief Judge Myers did. So I'll pause there.
Thank you, Co-Chair Cabarrus. Looking for any comments, statement?
Yes.
You're recognized, Co-Chair Brigham.
Thank you. And Bishop, I take your words to heart. Our subcommittee did when we discussed this on Monday. But we felt after the judiciary met with us and explained the intricacies and complexities of pretrial release and all that's involved, we felt that this was something that we could not put in our SMART recommendation, because it just wasn't realistic to do in this amount of time. We have a March 10th deadline looming. We wanted to make the best recommendations we could as a prosecution subcommittee to this task force. And I do agree that all of us as individuals and responsible citizens can certainly lobby our legislators in Tallahassee about this issue, and many others, certainly gun violence prevention. Our hands are tied there too, because the legislature preempts any local municipality or county to enforce, or excuse me, to create its own gun laws. So we do take that into account. We are still very much concerned about pretrial release, but we felt that it was just not realistic for us to move forward with any recommendations on that particular subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Let me just say I was in attendance of that meeting, and one of the things, and correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things that the Chief Judge also mentioned, and we talked about the process, the individuals that were in that meeting was corrections, was the State Attorney's Office, was the courts. And I think, and I'll direct this at you, Co-Chair Cabarrus, because I think you made an excellent point. We know what the tools are. I think everybody in that room recognizes now the seriousness that the community is feeling regarding what's taking place in communities. So it doesn't start and end with any one of those individuals. It starts with the recommendation that come from corrections. It starts with whether or not the state attorneys concur with those recommendations, and then it goes to the courts. And we understand now, and I'm glad the state attorney did an excellent presentation, because we all have our wheelhouses, if you would, and we just need to better understand how those wheelhouses work. So thank you for bringing that up. I see you're recognized.
Yes, thank you. And on behalf of the State Attorney's Office, I know that the State Attorney has indicated before, we are also members of the community. And in terms of the concerns of the dangers to the community and whether or not judicial discretion exists as it relates to pretrial release, we want to make sure that it's clear. There are individuals who are entitled to release. There's also a preference towards non-monetary conditions of bond and pretrial release. So of course it needs to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, but there are going to be situations where the community is not in agreement or not happy that individuals have been released, but these are individuals who are presumed innocent, and we want those same opportunities and presumptions as they relate to all of us. So we can't just say, well, there's judicial discretion. There's also preferences and built into the Constitution in terms of due process.
Thank you. Task Force Member Scott, you're recognized.
I was yielding some of my time to them, but I'll speak after they're done.
And I wanted to add on to go with the prosecution subcommittee. We did decide that it was in the best interest of everyone's time to actually focus on programs or recommendations that would be fruitful and attainable in a short amount of time that was left, and that is what we decided to move forward with.
Chair Love, our committee, we're going to work to present a diversion program overall, specifically targeted towards juveniles long term. But in the short term, and we've already started that in some aspects over the past, I'd say, 2 years, with my relationships, Mr. Miles Moran's relationship with the Sheriff's Office and Orlando Police, where we have a dialogue that is not just specific to us, where we're letting them know other members of the community, what they do, and what they're able to speak to and help with, so that there's a dialogue. Even with the shooting that happened of the 3-year-old, I was talking with Captain Joe Carter on a regular basis. And so just building those relationships so there's a dialogue between us and law enforcement, so when there are challenges that may not rise to the level of a courtroom, we're able to find like an impasse, as I've shared before in the past. So we're working on mapping that out, but our ultimate recommendation is going to be in their way of diversion, because with the pretrial diversion, a lot of that stuff is legislative, a lot of that stuff is governed by statute. I did mention before in our subcommittee meeting, and I'll mention here, that the Orange County Legislative Delegation meets once a year. They open up their meeting to anybody who wants to present or have anything, and I think that should be something that we should do for the next legislative session. Present to them something that would maybe impact the pretrial diversion, and then they can lobby on our behalf with a bill or bills. They may speak to that, and then we can focus more on the community-based issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Bishop Cabarrus, you're recognized.
I just want to respond back to what is being stated with the prosecution situation with pretrial release. Again, as I stated, we understand that there are legislative policies that have to be changed to address it. Even Chief Judge Myers, as I was there, I was not hallucinating. He made a statement that he does have judicial discretion, and there are things he could do. Bail reform and bail schedule is in the hands and power of the chief judge. So there are things that can be done that's out that does not contradict legislation, contradict our Constitution, and all I am asking or recommending is that those options be put in place. We have seen repeatedly on our streets that some young juvenile offenders have been arrested, and they cannot even be held and been released right back out on the same streets of our community and reoffending in the same way again. And it's not having anything to do with drugs or anything like that. It is firearm charges that are leading to people losing their life. Now, I don't know what could be more fruitful than a mother's child being dead in the streets. It's fine that you live in the community. You don't live in the community where it is happening. So when you come live in that community, then tell me about what's fruitful and what's not fruitful when I am the one bearing these young men and women and talking to parents in the middle of the night who are looking for justice to be served because of what is happening in our community. So please don't mind my passion. I have no direct attack against anyone in this room. My passion is about a community that is in disarray over crime and violence. And as you said, Co-Chair Love, collectively the enforcement, prosecution, prevention, and intervention have to work together, because if the correction area are not working together, the police are making arrests, and then later on there's no prosecution for the person arrested, and then 7 months later he kills somebody in a pop car, there's a problem.
Thank you. Thank you. Member Mulford, you're recognized.
Bishop, I appreciate your passion. I would challenge you in that I do live in these communities, and for 7 years, I worked alongside a lot of these people who are impacted. So I want you to understand that we do have the same passion, we do care, and we will do what's in the best interest of justice for all. There is never a situation where the prosecutor's office will seek to put someone out on the streets who is a danger to our society. We do have to go off of what is allowed by the judicial system and not what's requested from members of the community. That is what we have been taught in law school. That is what the judicial process has taught us, the legal process has taught us, and we invite you to come and have these conversations with us should you have any questions concerning particular instances that we are able to discuss with you on that basis that are not ongoing. So we do appreciate your passion, understand that we share the same passion, and that we are working as we're here and going to these meetings and meeting with other people in the community to find a resolve to ensure that Orlando is safe for all of us.
Thank you.
Comment.
No, my hand.
Ms. Rachel, Barris, let me go over here.
Right.
Rachel, you're recognized. Member Rachel.
Thank you, Co-Chair Love. I hope we will take a two-prong approach, as I think we have talked about. There does seem to be some low-hanging fruit, bail reform, and I don't mean to minimize these things at all. These are very serious and difficult challenges, but bail reform, Credible Messengers program, which we've heard a lot about. One of the comments from the survey was, why isn't limiting access to guns one of the prevention suggestions? I think we need to really assess that. The fact that we have the gun shows, large Orange County gun shows in the neighborhoods we're discussing, has always been a real big concern to me. I would like to see that ended, and perhaps as a county, we have that capacity to do that. And I don't want us to lose sight while we deal with the immediate concern of this kind of systemic change that we're after, which we have to set our sights far and wide to a 10-year plan. We are not going to create the community we all want to live in with a one-year budget. And so I am going to propose that we come together, or in our proposals to the county, is in a collaborative design process where we really do lay all of this out and put together that 10-year plan. Because, again, with partners like the state attorney's office, with this idea they have of a geographic steward, with ideas we have and we activated of community schools where we have hubs of these services, when we limit it to a geographic region and we pull together all that we have a possibility to build a resilient community with the resources that we're already allocating. Because with this criminal justice reform, we're going to lessen arrests, we're going to build up our communities. We have got to just keep our sights on this 10-year plan and know that we can do it if we commit.
Member Allen, we appreciate that. Let me say this, and I mean no disrespect to anyone here. Bishop Barris, I know you're passionate, but if we could, I want to try to get as much input from everybody within the room. We know that PTR is an issue. So with that being the case, if we have time, after we go around the room, I would greatly come back to you. But Member Cole, you're recognized.
I was enjoying that. But yes, I just wanted to talk about the 10-year plan. During the presentations, during the prevention subcommittees, we had presentations from law enforcement, which I do appreciate because not all the time we get direct access to ask law enforcement direct questions and, get direct answers. So I do appreciate the presentation. One of the things that were brought up was a forfeiture fund, and I believe that was brought up at the last general meeting when we discussed the funding, when the mayor said that he has proposed $2 million to these efforts. We were just educated on the forfeiture funds that all law enforcement agencies has, which I wasn't aware of, but they're obligated in some agencies, in some instances, to give to the community. So what I would propose is why not use a percentage of those forfeiture funds to fund the projects or the initiatives from this committee going forward. I think that to have those type of funds being utilized for the betterment of our community would be beneficial not only to our youth, but to the community as a whole, and as public relations, bridge the gap and really have law enforcement put some stake in the game financially into the prevention in this community to reduce the crime. Although you're doing things in the community, I think financially putting a stake in the game as activists as myself, Bishop, some of the other activists and some of the other community leaders here have done, I think specifically putting it towards the initiatives that we have developed along with the $2 million as we're going forward year in and year out, I think benefit Orange County as a whole. And then furthermore, once we do a complete diagnostic of which programs are being funded currently that are not working or ineffective, then we couple that with the forfeiture funds allocated to these initiatives. So that with these funds, because one of the things that was presented from the ceasefire program that was what was wrong with it is that people, when the money's gone or the grants are gone, then the services are gone. Well, if the forfeiture funds are there every single year, we now have a base of financial funds that can keep some of these initiatives and programs going. So I think that it would be beneficial to everybody for the forfeiture funds or a percentage of it to be utilized directly for these initiatives that we are developing to put some stake in the game.
Member Cole, thank you for bringing that up, and we're making progress. And I'm going to refer to Sheriff Mina because progress was made, I believe, just yesterday, Sheriff.
Well, just so people know what we're talking about is forfeiture funds when we arrest many of these violent drug dealers out there, and we take basically the proceeds from their illegal drug sales, and we seize them for forfeiture. And the forfeiture funds are to be used for training and equipment for law enforcement, but a small portion of that has to be directed towards the community and can only be used for certain programs, mostly surrounded crime prevention and mentoring and youth programs. So each year, going back when I was chief in Orlando and there in Orange County, I've given over double the amount that is required by law to fund local programs in our communities. And so this year, we decided to do things a little bit differently. Usually those requests come from many 501c3s throughout our community here in Orange County. So we decided to basically create a micro grant program and let community organizations and nonprofits that are involved in crime prevention and youth mentoring to submit applications for the funds. So we just recently gave $100,000 to community groups. Of course, all these funds that we give to the community groups have to be approved by the county commission. So just yesterday, at the county commission's meeting, they did approve $100,000 to go through these community organizations. The other thing we need to know about forfeiture funds is, like I said, the majority is to be used for law enforcement training and law enforcement equipment. And also, it's not guaranteed funding. So, depending on how many drug arrests we make, depending on how many seizures. Some years we might get a big seizure, and knowing that we have to split a lot of that money with our federal agencies and federal partners as well. So just to kind of reemphasize, it's something that we've been doing for years, and we've been giving more than twice the amount that we're required to give by law.
Member Cole, you're recognized.
Madam Chair.
Who was?
This is
Rump?
Rump.
You're
I'll
recognized.
speak after Cole.
Okay.
Thank
Member
you.
Cole, you're recognized.
All right, thank you. While I am encouraged by the forfeiture fund grant proposal that was that you just presented, I think that's great. However, I do think it's a bit of a conflict of interest when law enforcement creates that type of fund and then dictates to and then organizations have to go to law enforcement in order for them to apply for the funds. I think there's a bit of a conflict of interest where I would feel more comfortable, and I believe members of the community would feel more comfortable if it was in the hand of the county commission that had those funds and then was to allocate it out, because there's already a committee that looks for that vets all these organizations in the first place. And I believe it was your representative of your sheriff that said on average it's over like $100,000 and sometimes up to $300,000 that can be given every single year. And so, while I'm hearing a lot from law enforcement about what we can't do, but then when it comes to the county commission and asking for more money and millions of dollars, it's, so you're using the forfeiture funds for equipment and you're using it for that, but then you're asking the county commission for an increase in your budget, and you're saying, well, we can't use that because we need that for the same thing. So, something's got to give. It can't just be law enforcement when it comes to financial responsibility and equity that we just put our hands up and our hands are tied. We can't really do more than what we've already been doing. All we're trying to say is the funds that you're giving towards the community, then this is the community that's developing these programs and these initiatives. Put the funds, the county commissioner takes those funds and puts it directly towards the initiatives that we are proposing right now. Because if it doesn't happen and there's no recurring fund for these initiatives, we're going to be back here in another 5 years asking about more money and what happened, because just like with the ceasefire programs, when it runs out of money, then you don't have the services to actually provide to the community, and then we have juveniles further at risk, which then increases crime, which then will have the sheriff and law enforcement officers asking for more funds for the county commission. So it just makes sense, if we're going to sit here and roll up our sleeves and do things for the community, let's start with the money first. We can't cook a meal if we don't have any money for groceries. So we can talk about all the things that we want to put on the table, but if we don't have a direct fund that's going to fund these initiatives for 10 years out, as it was eloquently stated, then we're doing a disservice to every single thing that we're doing. It's the driving engine. So we need money and sustained money moving forward. And this is just one initiative, not saying it's the funding for all, but it's just one initiative that can be used on top of the $2 million that's already been allocated. Because what happens if Mayor Demmons, it's $2 million this year. What happens if, Lord forbid, he retires or something goes on to something else? Then there's another mayor that may not want the funds to go towards some of these initiatives. And then what's left with the community? We're going to just incarcerate the people who are the victims of poverty. So we need to have the funds and put stake in the game. If we're not going to do that, then really what we're doing is just good PR sitting here and sounding nice.
I believe Mayor Demmings wants to respond.
Yeah, I wanted to just jump in real quick. First, whenever we talk about the seizure of property from individuals who've been involved in criminal activity, et cetera, there are various laws and rules that govern how those funds can be used. And there are federal laws. Sometimes there are federal forfeitures that occur that give direction on how you can expend any proceeds derived from the forfeiture. And then there are state laws. What Sheriff Mina is primarily talking about here in terms of the pot of funds that he has used, it is under the Florida state laws. And the chief law enforcement officer of the respective agency, the way the law is set up now, really is the one who administers the expenditure of those funds. However, with the wisdom of the Florida legislature, what they said was that as it relates to the counties, the sheriff generally has to bring the final approval, if you will, to the Board of County Commission, and there is where it shows up on our board agenda. Members of the public have the opportunity, if they choose to give public comment, to participate in those Board of County Commission meetings at the time that it shows up on the agenda. I can tell you that from my 38 years of law enforcement experience and the last couple as the mayor, it almost never occurs where there are members of the public who come in and give any kind of input to the expenditure of the funds. But I would also tell you that as the sheriff, and I commend Sheriff Mina for being proactive, I believe that as it relates to the state forfeiture funds, there's a percentage that's codified where the legislature said that a portion can go to prevention-related programs, nonprofits who have a program that has outcomes associated with the expenditure of those dollars. At the federal level, there's some oversight. There were some rules that were changed where even if the law enforcement agency provides dollars to a community-based organization, they ultimately are still responsible to monitor and ensure compliance with the federal rules that's associated with that. And the last thing I will tell you is that in terms of the Board of County Commission, we understand that you very well may recommend both short-term and long-term recommendations. It is our desire that after hearing from our citizens, our residents on these issues, that each year, statutorily, we have to have public hearings and meetings about our budget. And so our goal is to begin to, through public policy, institutionalize the type of initiatives that our community says is important, what you deem as priorities. All of those meetings regarding the budget for the county, for the municipalities, and by the way, if it's a municipal police chief, their forfeiture expenditures go to that town council, city council, et cetera, for the final review, if you will, or approval. But it cannot be done without the direct involvement of the chief law enforcement officer of that agency making the recommendations. So we look to institutionalize within our county budgets long-term strategies and programs that are going to comprehensively address the issues that you will recommend. Our budget has recurring dollars or recurring programs that get considered in the context of that particular fiscal year. Unlike the federal government, local governments cannot spend more money than what they take in. So it's always part of the conversation has to be within the context of what the revenues and the expenditures and the priorities are going to be made. What I can tell you with Orange County, and I retired from the city of Orlando, spent a good full career there as well, that a priority always for any of these local budgets is public safety. The biggest portion of our dollars go towards public safety. It can be 40% or better of any of our budgets is devoted to public safety. So I want you to know that that already means that it is at a high bar of what our community, the moral values established within this community is that public safety is important, and that is the fundamental reason that government really exists. It is to keep the people safe.
Thank you, Mayor.
Chair Love. Oh, Rump, I'll go after you.
Member
Yes.
Rupp, you're recognized. And also, let me ask any members that have not been recognized and you want to make a comment or statement, please, by show of hands, so that Co-Chair Coffin and I can recognize you. Member Rump, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you very much. I just want to make a few comments in reference to the forfeiture funds. Thank you, Mayor, Board of County Commissioner, and Chef Mina. One of the Pine Hills mentoring programs benefit from the forfeiture program. So Pine Hills will benefit from that. Thank you very much. And it just crossed my mind as you're sitting here talking about the budget, Mayor, that how our population has grown. I'm a native Orlandian. So some 60 plus years ago, we was only about at 100, probably 300,000 residents. Right now, we're at 1.4 probably million residents. And with that growth, I think it's interesting that as the growth continues, we build more schools to accommodate the growth because of the population. And we build more hospitals to accommodate the growth because of the population. But with that same growth, we have to do the same thing in law enforcement because there's more population now here that law enforcement has to cover. I'm not saying over-police, but it's interesting how we can support other agencies for public safety as far as the population growth. But we don't recognize that law enforcement needs that same growth to stay with the population. Back to the law enforcement as far as the town hall meeting. As I said, and thinking about it, it'd be a good benefit for the law enforcement to come into the community, be an excellent opportunity to recruit from our own community and share the role of law enforcement to our young people, and that's an opportunity to recruit those in law enforcement. I just want to share those things, those items, and thank you very much.
Member Scott, you're recognized, and also I would ask if there's a representative here from the Orlando Police Department that can respond to the initiative that was just announced by Chief Roland, I believe, last week relative to
Yes.
recruiting. Member Scott, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair Love. So I want to highlight just two things. I get the opportunity on occasion to sit on the City of Orlando Mayor's matching grant program. And one thing that he does is he allows us to kind of give input on who ultimately gets selected to receive those funds. I'm not sure what Sheriff Mina's process was like, but if it wasn't like that process, I would suggest maybe reaching out to individuals in the community beyond your current Citizens Advisory Panel, and maybe however often you give out the money, have them have input. And I say that because there were two instances where I was able to say, hey, this organization, it's good, I volunteered, I spoke at this organization, and they got awarded. And then there was another instance where this applicant had put like address and stuff, and we looked online, couldn't find a location, it was a fake address. So I think that would be helpful and kind of bridge the gap between what the county commission approves versus what the sheriff's office submits, because then you'll have people in the community say, hey, yeah, I volunteered here, I went there, I saw this, I witnessed this, because, you know, it's hard to determine something on an application packet. Secondly, I forgot to mention this at the Prevention Intervention Committee, and I wanted to share this for everybody, and I'm kind of going to put the Orange County Jail on highlight. We talk about credible messengers, and we heard about that. Let me give you a real-world example of what a credible messenger is. It's someone who's been in that same situation specifically and can talk to it. I am fortunate to have volunteered for several years at the Orange County Jail. I don't volunteer there anymore. The person that replaced me is, in my opinion, a credible messenger. His name was Marquise McKenzie. He was a direct file juvenile. He also works for Florida Rights Restoration Coalition with Desmond Meade. But so Marquise does a entrepreneurship class with the juveniles there, and there's a process that Orange County Jail has in place. I'm not sure if it's 7 years or whatever, but they have a process in place where they vet an individual who's gone to prison and can come back and say, hey, you can, volunteer and give to the community. So I think that, if the jail wants to share that process, maybe it can be replicated in other organizations, because like I said, he went to prison, was arrested as a juvenile. Now he's, well, because of Corona, he's not doing that, but he's actually in the jail volunteering. So I think that's a actual example that's happening for credible messengers within Orange County government.
Thank you, Member Scott. Member Hartnett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I just wanted to point out again that we have multiple instances where legislature stands in the way of prevention of gun violence and violent crime. And I think it would be advantageous of us as a committee to address all points of legislative barriers that exist toward prevention. I submit again that we should have a fifth subcommittee that's focused on organizing legislative recommendations. And my second point today is that we have yet to discuss violence against the transgender community, which is statistically the most affected community by violent crime, proportionally. And we still haven't talked about that as a subcommittee, as a task force, or in any of the subcommittee meetings, which I attend the prevention and the prosecution subcommittee meetings. So I'd like for us to at least hear those words and see if there is space for that conversation at the county level. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Hartnett. Member Chan, you're recognized.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to take a quick opportunity while all the committee members were here to just make a comment. Thank you again for allowing me to serve on the community on this task force, and especially to my subcommittee members, I've learned a great deal from everyone. I just noticed that last week we had a lot of the officers present a lot of the programs, and previously several weeks ago, one of the resounding issues was, well, because of COVID-19, this program is no longer in effect. We're not doing this community outreach. We're not doing, this gym is closed, or there's a lot of things that have been shut down. So I would just want us to all be kind of mindful as we go forward with our final recommendations that organizations that we are looking at, I don't know how specific each subcommittee is going to be in their recommendation, but that we are mindful of the ones that have put very safe and good policies to use for enacting like all of the different changes that have occurred because of COVID-19. So I know that a lot of the officers, there was several amazing outreach programs, which was then followed up with, well, when we get back to that, and I just don't think that we are very near to operating in what was pre-COVID, and it will be an ongoing issue. And I just wanted to make sure that that was noted, that we are mindful and looking towards organizations and programs that are specifically designed to operate successfully during this very challenging time.
Thank you, thank you. We're close to, I think we're about 5 or so minutes from closing out, but is there a representative from the Orlando Police Department that can respond to the question regarding—
I'm over here, Rod.
Captain, you recognize.
How you doing?
Good, I can't see
Yes,
you.
thank you. Yeah, we're blocked by each other. What Chief Verlone announced past 2 weeks, it's a great program. It's partnership with Valencia Community College as well as Orange County Public Schools. Lake Nona High School and Jones High School are 2 of the schools participating right now, and they'll expand further based on partnerships. Approximately 100 kids at each of those schools have entered those programs. At the end of these programs, it's a criminal justice track that they will be on. And at the end, they will receive a certificate for an Academy of Law Enforcement, so they'll be graduates of a law enforcement academy through Valencia Community College.
Thank you, Captain. I'm going to just be short and sweet with this and just say to everybody, these are the type of discussions and conversations that we must have to make the level of progress that we are seeing today. We have 19 more days to do this, so I see that the level of engagement is going to be what we see here today. Member Cole, I'm going to recognize you, and then I want to pass the baton back to my co-chair. Member Cole, you're recognized.
I also got something next too.
Who do I see? Who is that? Where? Mr. Moran, you're recognized after Mr. Cole.
Yeah, I just wanted to quick thoughts, and I'll give it to Miles. One is the reason when a member said that, oh, I want to recognize that I've received funding, but you also consider yourself law enforcement. So that's one of the problems with the system, when we have law enforcement agencies saying that we're just going to, the people who are closest to us or buddy up with us, they're going to get the fundings. And then one meeting you say, okay, let's go into these hot zones and start locking up. And officers have to be more aggressive in these communities, and then you're the same person that gets the funding. That's what I'm talking
Point of
about.
corrections, I did not receive any funds.
I'm sorry,
Point of
I'm
correction, I did not
recognized.
receive any funds.
I'm recognized. That's one of the problems when it comes to the way that funds are distributed in our communities, especially when we have other organizations like we had in the joint meeting that never receive any funding at all, who get that slip through the cracks. My second thing is I have to reject the notion, as I know Marquise, I love Marquise, and I know there's a lot of people who are returning citizens that have done great work in our community that to mentor to people, but let's not have this notion that a credible messenger is someone that has to go through the criminal justice system or someone that has had to be formerly incarcerated. That's a piece. We have people in our community that have gone to college. We have doctors, we have lawyers, we have different professionals, business owners. So credible messengers doesn't have to be someone who's engaged in the system. That doesn't make them more of a credible messenger. What juveniles want to see when you speak with them is authenticity. It's not what you say. They watch who you are and your consistency in the community. So it's not just about getting funding or butting up to certain agencies and then touting yourself as a community leader. It's about how they recognize you in the community and your worth and how you value them. That's what makes you a credible messenger, so it all works together for its good.
Thank you, Member Cope. Martran, you're recognized.
Yeah, Miles Moraine. Wanted to speak on when we talk about the $2 million and then all the future funding and what goes on with the program. I know that I was one of the people who were seeing the former time when we tried to get ceasefire off the ground and we ran into problems, some of them that TJ mentioned. But the thing has always been about funding and consistency. It's never been about do we have the elements here in Orlando. And I know that for the past couple months we've been seeing presentations from different groups, but what I haven't seen has, an actual timeline of how we can actually get money to groups that are on the ground. And I know that similar to what the sheriff just did with the micro grants with the 501c3s, and, that's something that I can envision us doing with the recommendations that come from this when people are trying to get the money. Because one thing I can't emphasize more than enough is that if we're talking about $2 million coming out to solve crime, first of all, that's not enough to do anything that's going to be extensive long enough, but you can't just put it into one place and then expect that to solve everything. We can't just put it only into mental health or put it only into mentoring or put it only into one part of the thing. So I look at it as if a program takes $1 million to get funded and off the ground, or somebody comes to us, and like the city just did recently with almost $1 million worth of programming for 2 different groups, $1 million to 2 groups who need that much money versus $1 million spread around groups that have been on the ground, have been not receiving any money at all, will be a lot different. And I think that if we want to have something consistent and that lasts a long time, we can't pay any outside groups who aren't actually involved in what's going on right now to come in and bring a practice from somewhere else. And we can't just rely on increased law enforcement patrol or presence, because even from the first task force meeting that we had, where a lot of us were upset with the imaging of the 7 zip codes and these are the places that have the violent crime, that's not realistic. We got people who go do stuff in Paramore who don't live in Paramore, might live in Windermere. And we got people all over the city who need help. So I think the only way we could really get on the ground is if we give this money to people who are already on the ground or already in the know, and not just start all over with new groups that come to the table and just because they have a good presentation, we're going to, give them this money to start the program.
Thank you, Miles. Good point. I want to pass the mantle over to my co-chair, Mr. Coffin.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair Love. And we've come to the end of the meeting. There are just a couple of announcements and things to look forward to. It's just 4 weeks from today that we will have the March 10 meeting, which will be our final full task force meeting. And it means that there's a lot of work to do between now and then, because these ideas that have been slowly taking form need to be given full form so they can be put into the final report. And so I would ask that all committee members, subcommittee members, and the co-chairs of those subcommittees kind of keep this timeline in mind as we continue. Our meeting in a month will be at the Silver Star Recreation Center, the Magic Gym on Apopka on North Apopka Vineland Road. And I would recommend that if you have any questions or any things that need to be followed through, don't hesitate to contact the overall liaison that we have for the task force, Carol Burkett, and she'll be happy to help you. And also, I would remind you of the web page that we have. It's www.ocfl.net and then Safety Task Force. And if you have suggestions that you'd like to make, well, don't hesitate to make those suggestions. So with that, I'd like to thank all of you for being here. And is there anything else that Mayor Demings you wanted to say, or anything else that you, Co-Chair Love, wanted to say? If not, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
Motion.
Okay, and that's seconded?
Second.
And it's over. Meeting adjourned.